Welcome to Humble and Hungry, episode 6. I can't believe we're already at the 6th episode. Thank you so much to everyone who has followed along this journey. And if this is your first episode tuning in, I would like to introduce Humble and Hungry as a place where I'm exploring all of the small, intentional things we can do to lead happier and healthier lives. Before I get started, I want to give a special shout out to Infertility Awareness Week. It's why I'm wearing my orange today. And that is to stand really with all of the women who are fighting an infertility battle or who have already had an infertility journey and still carry it closely in their hearts. So that's something special to me, and I just wanted to point that out. And also we'll share a little bit more about that at the end of the episode. But I am so excited for today's show because I think everyone watching will learn something from my guest, Preetal Karecha. She is a mental health therapist from Maryland, and she sat down to talk to me really about how we talk to ourselves. We talk about how to set healthy expectations for ourselves and really how just to speak to ourselves during any type of wellness journey. So I don't want to give away too much, and I certainly can't say it better than she can. So let's just check out our interview with Preetal. Hi, Preetal. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Humble and Hungry. To everyone watching, Preetal Karecha is a mental health therapist from Maryland, and I invited her to join us here today on Humble and Hungry to talk about kind of like the mental health side of fitness and wellness journeys. So I really want to talk about the way we talk to ourselves throughout these journeys. And I know Preetal has a lot to share with us. So thank you so much for being here. Now, when we talk about the way people talk to themselves, this really starts with the way people set expectations for themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we were talking about unrealistic expectations, right? Like unrealistic expectations are so rigid. Like there's no room for any type of flexibility, right? And so an example is, I'm going to do this and I'm never going to make a mistake. That's completely unrealistic. Like there is no circumstance that anybody can never make a mistake.
Sure.
Right? I mean, they might not make a mistake, but that's not very realistic. And then what happens when you feel like you perceive that you did make a mistake?
Right, then you're making it tougher for yourself.
Yeah. So, unrealistic expectations have a lot of shoulds. So, you're telling yourself, I should do this or I shouldn't do this. Very rigid. And, we always talk about this, like don't should on yourself, like too many shoulds. So yeah, they need to be more realistic, doable, and have some flexibility.
Right. People have to give themselves a little room to go back and forth sometimes.
Yes.
All right. I like that. Because I know for me personally, I've tried a million different like wellness plans and whatever. And when I do something that I wasn't planning to do, there's so much guilt and shame associated with that. And it makes it so much harder to keep going.
I see that a lot. Like people are telling themselves like this is where that language comes in. But this I am a failure. That's the shame. Like that's really saying, so shame is I am a bad person.
Right.
Or something, that's a reflection of me as a person. Guilt is I did something wrong. So what you're referring to is when you tell yourself like, oh, I didn't do this the way I thought I was going to, then you're saying I myself am a failure, right? But when you really take a step back and look at these expectations that are so rigid, that don't allow for mistakes, right? Tell yourself all these shoulds, then that's a total invisible trap. Guilt is I did something bad or I did something wrong. Very simple explanations of it. But so then we really want to think about like, what did you do something wrong? Did you do something bad?
Right.
Because you mentioned like this idea that you failed, right? Or that you couldn't, like, what was your self-talk during all of your experiences?
I think that when I personally like move off of a plan, like do something that I wasn't planning to do, I get like mad at myself or think like, why did I do that? Like as if like there wasn't a totally reasonable reason something happened.
Yeah.
And again, like even though I know it's not fair, it's natural for my brain to get that guilt or shame feelings. So I guess for people watching, it's good to set expectations for yourselves that are reasonable so you don't have that guilt and shame, right?
I think it helps with that, but I also think it's so ingrained in us somehow that associations with food, like that there's good food and bad food, right? So, this like if you do something bad, if you stab somebody, is that bad?
Yes.
But if you eat a cupcake, is that bad?
No.
Right. So that's the idea of like good and bad. So those are just very deep rooted kind of like things that we've experienced our whole lives and these messages. So it's really hard to break that. And I think with a lot of just awareness of what you're thinking when you do that, right? So if you notice that you're kind of having these automatic thoughts, these thoughts about failing or like, just the kinds of stuff you were talking about, if you can notice that, then you can work with it. Do you think you notice that you would think that way?
I don't know if it's because I'm like, I've gone through so much like health stuff that I like recognize my thoughts more now. I don't know if I always did, but now I can like actively like know, like I'm doing this to myself. Like I know I'm doing this to myself. But it's really hard to sort of give yourself compassion and like let it go. That's so hard to do.
I mean, I think it's with the expectations, part of that is being able to say like this, none of this is easy, right? Like we're undoing core belief, like really deep rooted thinking patterns. Like that's not going to be easy.
Right. So if you have to take a couple deep breaths and like let yourself feel bad for a minute, but you have to come back out of it. You have to say, this wasn't the end of the world. This wasn't a bad thing, and just keep going.
And I'm not bad.
I'm not bad.
I'm not a failure.
Right. And those are powerful words too. Like if people can remember to just think those simple things when they need to, those mean a lot too.
I mean, think about the difference. If you say to yourself, I ate a cupcake, I'm a failure. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I do this? Other people can do this. What's wrong with me? Versus, I'm human. That cupcake was good. My body needed a cupcake. Right? And it's fine. It's just a cupcake. I enjoyed it. Tasted great. Right? So when you try and like deprive yourself or try not to think about it, we were talking about this thought suppression, right? Like trying not to think about it. You think about it more, right? So like, don't think about pink elephants. You're going to start thinking about pink elephants. In fact, it'll probably show up in your dreams tonight. Now that I said
I was going to say, I'm definitely thinking about pink elephants.
Right. So if I tell you not to think about it, you're going to think about it more. So, and if you know that and you can accept that, right, that's kind of part of the thinking pattern and the process, then it makes it easier to say, yeah, that cupcake was what I wanted right now. And that's okay.
I like that. When we talk about, I know you've said before how like language and words create suffering. So the guilt and shame conversation is very closely tied to that. Is there anything else about that thought that you think people need to know when it comes to like that language we use?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about food and the idea that there's no good food or bad food, right? So food is just food. So if you start to tell yourself that you ate something bad and you just start to get into that like language of that self-talk of like, this is bad, I'm a failure, all of that, then yeah, that creates suffering, right? And so suffering is optional. You can change your response, not easily. It's a lot of work, but But yes, language is really important. And, if you say, I made a mistake or something like that, right? If you change the language to, this is an opportunity for me to better understand myself, or better understand what I need, or notice in the moment what I was thinking or what I was feeling physically, then that's an opportunity.
I like that idea of turning something that's like tough into being just like an opportunity to learn more for later.
Yeah.
And that's what you would tell your friend, right? If you talking to your friend about something, you wouldn't say, you wouldn't say to your friends what you say to yourself, right? I like when it comes to like showing that self-compassion and things like that.
Yeah, that's that like double standard, right? Like the things that you were telling yourself. Like, can you imagine saying that to one of your friends if they said they are a terrible failure for eating, Reese's peanut butter cups or something, right? Like, can you imagine yourself saying that to any of your close friends?
No, and saying that makes you realize like how wild it is that people do that to themselves. But so it's just practicing compassion for ourselves, basically, the same we give others.
Yeah, it's saying that, just because I think it doesn't mean it's true, right? It's recognizing that I may have had these types of thoughts my whole life. Like you don't, sometimes in therapy, you learn and figure out like, when did I start thinking this way? Like, where did these beliefs come from? Right. And you can kind of work through and explore that and understand that better. So yeah, it's,
Makes sense.
yeah.
So what else is important when it comes to like talking to yourself during a health and wellness journey? Like what else should people consider? I know the way we compare ourselves to other people can be really impactful. How do you feel people should talk to themselves in that situation?
Well, when you and I were chatting, we were talking about like how harmful comparisons can be because you just don't know what you're comparing to. And this is where we give other people kind of the benefit of the doubt almost and say like, oh, well, look how fast they did it. Or look how kind of like their process was easier. Like, why can't I be more like that? But we just never know a person's whole story. And, as far as experiences go, just because two people are in similar situations or going through something kind of similar, right, doesn't mean they're experiencing that the same, like that their feelings about it are the same. And so that comparisons are just, they're harmful.
Yeah. And it's almost like you don't know what someone's like mentally going through, but you also don't know what someone's like physical body's going through. Like maybe they can lose weight faster than you, or maybe they can't, or, so you never really think when you're comparing yourself to someone else, like what all of their X factors are. So I love your points about like, just like not comparing yourself to something you don't know.
Well, I mean, think about all the things that happen with like medication and hormones, how our bodies change, pregnancy, infertility, all the things, stages in life, everything, right? And so comparing, I mean, you're not going to get the full picture, and it only sets you up to feel worse about yourself.
Right. And hopefully people can find communities. I mean, I know I'm thinking of this because like I found this like little Instagram community full of people, not one single person I knew, like when I needed like a little support network. I went on Instagram and found a bunch of people doing a plan I was doing. So I found that really helpful because I was finding like a sincere community, but like when you're just picking someone out of a hat and starting to compare yourself to them, it's not natural, right? So
did that feel, I was going to say, did that feel helpful too because you didn't know them?
Oh yeah. So for people who don't know, I have an Instagram that I kept throughout like my journey of losing 130 pounds. And I really didn't tell anyone besides like my very best friends and family about it until I was actually probably done losing weight. Like it was just like my personal account, but I didn't share with anyone. People definitely found me just because algorithms and stuff. So I knew some people started to know about it, but it was really just like a place for me to do what I needed to do, keep me accountable. And now I've kind of become more empowered to use it and share it because I'm on the other side, because I'm at the part where people might compare to, which is a really good point when it comes to like, you don't know what you're comparing yourself to. So that's just my experience with it.
So would you want people to compare to you?
If they compare to if they're paying attention to everything I say, you know, like
they know the whole package.
Yeah. And that I struggle a lot. I mean, after I lost 130 pounds, but then I got pregnant, I had a son, I lost more weight, but I've still never reached my like original weight again. And that's like really hard for me, something I've been working towards. So I try to be really like vulnerable and candid. So hopefully if people are comparing themselves to anyone, they're like reading all the details. They know what's going on, you know. I also think like in my situation, at least, like I learned that I don't have to be at my goal weight. Like I'm like proud of my body. I'm proud of who I am. I've like reached that self-acceptance with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I feel like everyone gets to that at a different point, and it comes and goes.
That's the expectations part, right? So you feel like, hey, I'm really good at being easy on myself now. And then you have a day where you're not quite as accepting of yourself. And you're like, great, now we're back at square one, right? Like that's going to happen. That doesn't mean you're back at square one. It just, that's how it is, right? There's ups and downs and how you feel, right? So you think like, oh, I got here. I'm self-accepting. Like it's going to change.
Right. And that's when, based on our conversation, so that's when you'd recommend someone just recognize it as they're just thoughts, right?
You want to notice it, right? So if you are aware of it, then just because, and we were saying this earlier, just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. So thoughts are thoughts, and you let them pass.
I like that. It sounds very comforting to look at it that way.
It sounds comforting. It's really hard to do.
It probably takes a lot of time.
It takes time. It takes practice. It takes awareness, right? Like these changes are not easy. Changing your thinking patterns, right? Changing your view of yourself. I mean, this is the value in therapy often, is that you can go through this journey of healing your view of yourself.
That's powerful. So someone who's watching this right now, if they're going to take one thing away from our conversation, what do you think is the most important thing for someone to know or remember or just take away with them?
The most simplest thing is that we are human and we make mistakes and we learn and we have unwanted thoughts, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean anything, right? They're just thoughts, and we learn and we grow. I mean, really, just so simply, we're human. Everybody, therapists, doctors, everybody.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. And I know your day job is like impacting people and helping people. So I appreciate you spending this time with us, because I think it's such valuable advice. It's things people don't slow down and think about every day, but we could all appreciate, I'm sure. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Patel, thank you so much for joining me here on Humble and Hungry. Your insight and expertise is so valued and so appreciated. So I was thinking about today's episode. Right off the top, I gave a quick shout out to Infertility Awareness Week, and then we really dug in to how to speak to ourselves while on a health and wellness journey. And both of these things are very near and dear to my heart. So I know that they both really involve having compassion for ourselves and being able to love ourselves wherever we are in a journey. So I thought it would be perfect for today's Humble and Hungry Happy Thought to really wrap things up with a few quotes about self-compassion. So we have two quotes today, but I promise they're quick. And the first one is a self-compassion affirmation. And it is, I am not looking to escape my darkness. I am learning to love myself there. I absolutely loved that. And if you've ever had a long journey, you understand why that really resonated with me. Next, the last quote I wanted to share is, self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would give to others. I thought that was a great way to wrap up the show. So thank you so much for being here. Please join me next week because I'm going to introduce you to another rock star lady, Chelsea Castiglia. We sat down and talked all about how she absolutely crushed her fitness and wellness goals. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to get through those tough social situations when you're on an eating plan or wellness journey. So make sure to tune in for that. See you next time.